AP Review, Section 5, The Wars of Religion. Charles V. He steps down in 1556, and it opens up a new era of possible peace in Europe. He splits the empire with the Treaty of Catu Cambresis. Philip II got Spain, Italy, the New World, and the Lowlands, while Ferdinand got the Austrian part of the empire. Instead of peace, an era of religious wars began. Calvinists versus Spain, Huguenots versus Valois, starting a 40-year civil war, Catholics versus the Anglicans versus the Calvinists in Scotland and England. Europe is divided between Philip II and the Catholics versus the Calvinists. Spain under Philip II. Spain in the 16th century was an era of Spanish power and glory, beginning with Ferdinand and Isabella and both peaking and ending under Philip II. On paper, Spain was unbeatable. Philip was very Catholic and only spoke one language to send the message that it was his and only his kingdom. He micromanaged everything within the kingdom. He was the undisputed master of Italy. He directly controlled Naples and Milan. He installs puppet governments in Genoa and Florence. All the popes know that he's in charge. He uses audiencias to report back to him on the governing and ruling of the New World by his officials. These were royal councils who directly reported to Philip. Philip believed that he was second to God and was the first absolute monarch of Europe. He micromanaged everything from El Escorial, and he outlived all four of his wives, believed by historians to be responsible for the killing of Don Carlos and the son of Elizabeth de Valois because he was deformed. He never economic power and limitations. 96% of all Spanish cargo was bullion. 20% of that went directly to Philip himself to support his armies throughout Europe. Other than the bullion, Spain's economy was not great. They were being gouged by the Flemish merchants on wool trading. Philip controlled the two most important European ports, Amsterdam and Genoa, and was charged with ridiculous tariffs. Enemies realized that if the bullion flow was stopped, Spain could be beaten. This begins an era of piracy. Successes. The Battle of Lepetano in 1571, where he defeats three-fourths of the Ottoman fleet. Philip had 300 ships and 80,000 men. Ottomans had 320 ships and 100,000 men. Philip becomes the master of the Mediterranean, and the Ottomans are never the same. The annexation of Portugal. Portugal was ruled by the Braganzas. The family intermarries until they produce deformed children, at which point no male heir is available. Philip takes advantage of this and moves into Portugal. He gets the entire Portuguese Empire. The French Wars of Religion. This one's long and complicated. The French were in complete and utter disarray with 40 years of civil war sparked by religion. The Huguenots versus the Catholics. Nobles began fighting for control. The bourgeoisie began fighting for rights, and Paris goes crazy. Henry II of France was an inept ruler, constantly went on vacation with his mistress, Diane de Poitiers, and was ashamed of his wife because it showed the debt France was in to the Medicis. During his reign, the nobles began gaining power again. The Montmorency family. Power was in their title, Constable of France, which was the military leader's title. They had more land than any other family, and they had a private army. The Bourbons. They were princes of the blood, next in line to the throne, and they controlled southern France. Their home base was the Kingdom of Navarre. The family Guise. They were the wealthiest family, and they controlled much of northern France. They had the loyalty of the Parisians and held advisory positions in France. Francis, Duke of Guise, was the king's top advisor and the best army general the French had. Mary Guise was engaged to the Dauphin, Francis II. Louis of Guise was a cardinal and most powerful clergy in France. Heirs to Henry II. When Henry dies of a jousting incident, as he has three sons: Francis II, who was a sickly child that died after 2 years in control; Charles IX, who was not right in the head and unfit to rule; and Henry III, who was also weak and unfit to rule. Their mother, Catherine, dominated them as Queen Regent. Under her, everything falls apart. Admiral Coligny and and Louis, Prince of Condé, convert to Calvinism. They form a plan to kidnap Francis II, but are caught. The Guise kills everyone involved in the plot and decorates the castle with their body parts. Catherine spares their lives in order to prevent a Guise takeover. Religion of France was pretty much Calvinist. Calvinists were the Huguenots. 10% of France were Huguenots, and 40% of all nobles were Huguenots. Apathetic Catholics that didn't clash with the Calvinists. Admiral Coligny and Louis, Prince of Conde, in the late 1550s, both of these men converted to Calvinism and became Huguenots. They were the leaders of the Montmorency and Bourbons, respectively. They formed a plan to kidnap Francis II to convert him to Calvinism. All men involved in the plot die except for Coligny and Louis. Catherine de' Medici saves and spares them in order to prevent a takeover by the Guise. Catherine de' Medici was the wife of Henry II, who tried to merge Calvinism and Catholicism, like Elizabeth did, in order to unite France. The Colloquy of Poissy. It was an attempt to bring a compromise between the Huguenots and the Catholics. This is a huge disaster and works against the compromise by inciting the mostly apathetic Catholics throughout France. Each side believes they can beat the other, and they therefore go to war. The Duke of Guise is blocked by the papacy, the Jesuits, and Philip II versus the Huguenot families of the Montmorency and Bourbons. Philip aids the Guise to help tear France apart for an eventual conquering. St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre. Many Huguenots flocked to Paris for the wedding of Henry of Navarre and Marguerite. Once there, Admiral Coligny proposes to Charles IX that if France would start a war with Spain, it would unite France and end the civil war. Henry, the Duke of Guise, opposes a war with France because Philip is backing him in the war with the Huguenots. Catherine de' Medici agrees with him and is the voice of reason to Charles. An assassin sent by Henry tries to kill Coligny. He fails, setting the Huguenot nobles into a fury. Coligny goes back to appeal to Charles over the war with Spain, and Henry, Duke of Guise, convinces Charles that the Huguenots are just here in Paris to overthrow him. Charles approves the plan to kill Coligny and the nobles. The massacre commences, however, it grows much larger than intended. After Coligny's death, as a signal, 3,000 Huguenots die in Paris. 10,000 outside of Paris die. The incited Parisians are largely to blame. Henry of Navarre converts to Catholicism and is wed to Marguerite. Charles dies 2 years later. Politique. This is a group of individuals that preferred leaders who put the country's interests before their religious beliefs. It was a separation of church and state. War of the Three Henrys. This was the climax of the religious wars in France. Philip tells Henry of Guise it's time to take control. Guise marches on Paris and incites the Parisians. Henry III is forced to flee the city, and by 1588, Guise controls Paris. Henry of Navarre sends an assassin to kill Guise, and the Guise send an assassin to kill Henry III. By default, Henry of Navarre wins and proclaims himself Henry IV of France. France, however, was not ready for a non-Catholic ruler. The Edict of Nantes. Henry proclaims the state religion to be Catholic. However, the Huguenots retain full civil and religious rights, with the one stipulation that they can't worship within 5 leagues of Paris. The Revolt of the Netherlands. The background. Their lifestyle was much different from the rest of Europe, especially their rulers in Spain. It was a business society with the highest per capita wealth in Europe, the lowest poverty rate, highest literacy rate, and it was made up of 17 provinces. The northern seven in present-day Netherlands spoke Dutch and were known for trade and shipping due to the Amsterdam port. The largest province was Holland. It was a Calvinist since 1550. Culture was similar to the German culture. The southern 10 provinces were in present-day Belgium, Flanders, and spoke Flemish. Main city of Antwerp was Europe's financial center. These provinces were Catholic and had culture similar to the French culture. The provinces put religion out of business when it allowed them to work peacefully together. The Calvinist fury. The Counts of Egmont and Hoorn. These counts were the most powerful nobles in the Low Countries. They go before the Viceroy of the Netherlands, Margaret of Parma, Philip's sister, and pled their case for Philip to back off the Calvinists. Both Egmont and Hoorn were Catholic. However, they wanted the economy to stop being disrupted by the conflict. During the session, Margaret's advisors called the counts beggars, which comes to face becomes a face for the revolt. So the Calvinist fury was after Margaret of Parma rejects the Count's plea that the Calvinists go into a fury which they deface and destroy Catholic art, property, symbols, and iconoclasts. Philip responds drastically, sending in 10,000 troops under the Duke of Alva. The Duke of Alva puts in the Council of Troubles. Alva starts the Council of Troubles, which establishes a tribunal to try and execute Calvinists. Alva sets an example by executing Horn and Egmont. Revolt looks like it might be over before it starts. The William of Orange, or the Silent. He was a brilliant leader who stepped forward after the death of Horn and Egmont. He was a politique and religious opportunist. He was brilliant at masking his intentions, hence the Silent. He began subsidizing piracy on the Spanish, forming a group called the Sea Beggars. They are so effective that one garrison of Spanish troops doesn't get paid for 4 years. The Spanish Fury. The garrison that was unpaid sacks Antwerp to get money and spoils. 800 people die, mostly Flemish Catholics. William the Orange uses this to galvanize the revolt, uniting the provinces. The Union of Brussels, the official union of the northern and southern provinces. Duke of Parma and Union of Arras. Sent in by Philip to replace the strong methods of Alva, the Duke of Parma appeals to the southern provinces over their Catholicism and breaks the Union of Brussels in two. The Union of Arras, or Utrecht, it was the union between the southern provinces. The Utrecht was between the northern provinces. Elizabethan England. Background. Under Elizabeth, the British Isles were complete opposites of each other. England was a dynamic world power of 4 million people. Scotland was half wild and politically chaotic, with Mary Queen of Scots as ruler. Religiously, it was wrecked by John Knox and the Presbyterians. Ireland was barely on the edge of civilization. Elizabeth I of England. One of the greatest rulers in history, she refused to marry. When she comes to power, the Catholics ruled the advisory positions, and many Protestants returned to England. She got the religion of England under control by melding them into the Anglican Church and keeping the hierarchy of the Catholic Church with the doctrine of the Protestant Church. She enforces this by fining people by not attending. They write the 39 Articles of Faith, which is the backbone of the Anglican doctrine. Elizabeth understood the limitations of England because of Philip II. Under her, nobles held high positions as she attempted not to socially or politically rock the boat. Modern parliamentary concept is started with the House of Commons and the House of Lords. Her most trusted advisors were Sir William Cecil, Lord Burgundy, and Sir Francis Walsingham, Walsingham was her hatchet man who protected her and made her ignorant to numerous assassination attempts. 39 Articles of Faith, see above. Mary, Queen of Scots. She realizes that Scotland is horrid in comparison to France, where she was briefly queen. She tries to make Catholicism the official religion, but John Knox and the Presbyterians laugh at her attempts to pass the law that to be enforced. She sees Scotland as a temporary position and says she has claim to the throne of England, which she wants to gain upon Elizabeth's death. In 1554, she puts pressure on Elizabeth to make her heir to the throne, something Elizabeth ignores. Mary marries Henry Stuart, Lord Donnelly to solidify her claim. The marriage is horrible, and one of her affairs, David Rizzio, is brutally beaten by Donnelly and his friends. The 30 Years' War. The background. A war in which opposing non-German armies fought entirely on German soil. This war was the deadliest in Europe until World War I. Ferdinand of Styria, the Holy Roman Emperor Ferdinand II, becomes the heir apparent and will not tolerate Protestants in the Holy Roman Empire. Once he is crowned King of Bohemia, he strips away the religious toleration granted to the Bohemians by Rudolf II with the Letter of Majesty. The rest of this study guide I'm going to allow you to omit because it's entirely too in-depth. You need to look over your notes and study them based on the 30 years, talking about the 30 Years' War and society during the wars of religion. Do not complete this study guide past where it says 30 Years' War background.